The dust billowed across the parched main street of Kennewick, Wyoming territory, as the woman stumbled into town, her threadbare dress clinging to her emaciated frame, and her eyes reflecting nothing but hollow emptiness. The year was 1873, and while the Transcontinental Railroad had connected the nation 4 years prior, this remote settlement remained a frontier outpost where survival demanded grit and mercy came at a premium. Blood trickled down her temple, mingling with the sweat and grime that masked her delicate features. Her legs gave way beneath her just as she reached the weathered porch of Landry's General Store, where Quentin Bridges had been loading supplies onto his wagon. He dropped the sack of flour he'd been carrying and rushed to catch her before she hit the dirt. "Easy there," he said, his voice deep yet gentle as he cradled her in strong arms that had spent years breaking horses and working cattle. At 32, Quentin had seen his share of hardship on the frontier, but something about the desperate vulnerability in this woman's eyes stirred something protective in him. She flinched at his touch, her eyes darting wildly like those of a cornered animal. "Don't," she rasped, her voice cracked from thirst and disuse. "You're safe now," Quentin assured her, nodding to old man Landry who'd appeared in the doorway. "Get Doc Patterson. Tell him to meet me at my place." The woman tried to speak again but slipped into unconsciousness instead, her head lolling against his chest. Quentin lifted her as if she weighed nothing and placed her carefully in the back of his wagon, covering her with a spare blanket to shield her from curious onlookers. In a town as small as Kennewick, a stranger, especially a woman traveling alone, was cause for speculation. The 20-minute ride to his homestead passed in silence except for the creak of wagon wheels and the occasional worried whicker from his horses. Quentin had built his home 3 years ago, after winning a poker game that netted him enough to buy 100 acres of promising land. The small but sturdy cabin sat nestled against a backdrop of pine trees, with a view of the distant mountains that never failed to remind him why he'd chosen this life of solitude. Doc Patterson arrived shortly after Quentin carried the mysterious woman inside and laid her on his own bed. The physician, a graying man with kind eyes and steady hands, examined her with practiced efficiency. "She's suffering from exhaustion and dehydration," he declared, cleaning the wound on her temple. "This cut isn't deep, but she's got bruises that tell a story I don't reckon she'll be eager to share." He glanced at Quentin with knowing eyes. "She's been running from something or someone." "Will she recover?" Quentin asked, standing awkwardly in the doorway of his own bedroom, hat in hand. "With rest, proper nourishment, and no further misadventures, yes." The doctor packed his bag. "Keep her comfortable. I've given her laudanum for the pain. She'll likely sleep through the night." After the doctor left, Quentin sat in a chair by the fireplace, occasionally rising to check on his unexpected guest. It wasn't until dawn began to break that she stirred, a soft moan escaping her lips as consciousness returned. Quentin was at her side in an instant, offering a tin cup of water. "Drink slowly," he advised. She startled at his presence but accepted the water, her eyes a striking shade of amber never leaving his face as she drank. "Thank you," she finally managed, her voice stronger than it had been the day before. "You gave the town quite a fright yesterday," he said, attempting levity. "Do you have a name?" She hesitated, glancing down at her bandaged hands. "No," she said finally. "Not anymore." Quentin raised an eyebrow but didn't press. "Well, everyone needs a name, can't just call you madam forever." The ghost of a smile flickered across her face. "I suppose not. You're welcome to stay here until you're recovered," he offered, surprising himself with the invitation. "I've got plenty of space and no one waiting for me to return elsewhere." Fear clouded her expression. "I can't stay." "It's not safe for you or for me," he asked bluntly. Both, she admitted after a long pause. Quentin nodded, having expected as much. I've faced my share of troubles. Whatever's chasing you would be unwise to trespass on my land. He gestured to the rifle mounted above the fireplace. Besides, Wyoming territory is a big place, easy to disappear in. She studied him, seeming to gauge his sincerity. Why would you help a stranger? Because somebody once helped me when I was down on my luck, he replied honestly. And because whatever you're running from, it's clear you didn't deserve it. She didn't respond, but the tight line of her shoulders relaxed slightly. Rest now, Quentin said, standing. We can figure out the details when you've got your strength back. Over the next few days, the woman gradually recovered. Quentin brought her food, fresh clothes borrowed from the widow Johnson in town, and kept a respectful distance. He slept on a bedroll by the fireplace, insisting she keep the bed. On the fourth day, as Quentin returned from tending his small herd of cattle, he found her sitting on the porch, wrapped in a quilt despite the warm afternoon sun. You're looking better, he observed, settling into the chair beside her. I feel better, she admitted. Your kindness has been unexpected. Folks out here understand hardship, he said simply. Most of us are running from something, even if it's just the confines of so-called civilization. She smiled at that, a genuine expression that transformed her face and hinted at the beauty that hardship had temporarily masked. What brought you out here, Mr. Bridges? Quentin, he corrected. And it's a long story involving a dead brother, a broken promise, and land that should have been mine. He shrugged. But that's ancient history now. I'm sorry, she said, and he believed her sincerity. Nothing to be sorry about. I've made peace with it. He studied her for a moment. You know my name, but I still don't know yours. She looked out at the land spreading before them, the grassy plains giving way to foothills and distant mountains. I don't know who I am anymore, she admitted softly. The woman I was died somewhere between St. Louis and here. Quentin nodded, understanding the need to shed one's past. Then perhaps you need a new name to go with your new beginning. She considered this. What would you call me? The question caught him off guard, and he found himself studying her face, the determination in her jaw, the resilience behind her eyes, the quiet dignity despite her circumstances. Lily, he said finally. You remind me of the prairie lilies that bloom after the harshest winters. Delicate-looking but strong enough to withstand the elements. Something shifted in her expression, a softening around the eyes. Lily, she repeated, testing the name. I think I could be Lily. You need a surname too if you're to start fresh, Quentin pointed out. How about? She thought for a moment. Ashford, Lily Ashford, she nodded, seeming to approve of her creation. Yes, that feels right. Lily Ashford it is then, Quentin agreed, offering his hand as if they were meeting for the first time. She took it, her smaller hand fitting into his calloused palm. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr. Bridges. Quentin, he reminded her with a smile. If we're to be housemates, even temporarily, let's dispense with formalities. The following week established a routine. Lily regained her strength, and though she still startled at unexpected sounds and wouldn't venture into town, she began helping around the homestead. She proved skilled with a needle and thread, mending Quentin's work clothes that had long needed attention. Her cooking transformed the basic staples of frontier fare into surprisingly flavorful meals. Where did you learn to cook like this? Quentin asked one evening as they shared a rabbit stew that somehow tasted more like a restaurant dish than campfire food. Lily's expression flickered before settling into careful neutrality. My father was particular about his meals. I learned young. Quentin sensed there was more to the story but didn't pry. Well, I'm grateful. Been eating my own cooking for too long. You've been on your own a while then? She asked, steering the conversation away from herself. 7 years since my wife died, he said matter-of-factly. Childbirth lost them both. Lily's eyes widened with sympathy. I'm so sorry, Quentin, he nodded acknowledgement. Catherine was a good woman, brave to follow me out here. He stared into his bowl. Sometimes I think the land takes as much as it gives. Yet you stayed, she observed. Had nowhere else to go, he admitted. And the promise of this place, it gets in your blood. He glanced up at her. You'll see if you stay long enough. The possibility hung between them, unaddressed but present. As summer progressed into early autumn, Lily's presence transformed Quentin's bachelor homestead. Curtains appeared at windows, wildflowers in jars brightened the table, and the cabin gained a sense of order it had lacked for years. More significant was the change in Quentin himself. The taciturn rancher found himself looking forward to returning home, to sharing meals and quiet evenings by the fire, discussing books, or simply watching the sunset from the porch. For her part, Lily seemed to unfurl like a flower in the sun. The haunted look in her eyes receded, replaced by a cautious contentment. She still refused to accompany Quentin into town, but she ventured farther from the cabin each day, eventually helping with garden work and even learning to milk the cow Quentin had recently acquired. You're a natural with animals, he observed one morning as she successfully approached his most skittish horse, a Mustang he'd only partially gentled. They don't judge, she replied, stroking the horse's neck. They only care about how you treat them now, not who you were before. Quentin leaned against the corral fence. Sounds like a philosophy worth adopting. She turned to him, studying his face. Is that why you haven't asked about my past? Because it doesn't matter to you. I figure you'll tell me when you're ready, he said. Or not at all. Either way, you're safe here. Lily's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Thank you, she whispered. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Lily broke her silence. I was married, she began, her voice so quiet Quentin had to lean closer to hear. To a man named George Thornton, a banker from St. Louis, respected, wealthy. She twisted her hands in her lap, and cruel behind closed doors. Quentin felt a surge of anger but kept his expression neutral, not wanting to interrupt her flow of words. At first, it was just words, criticism, control. Then came the punishments. She touched her arm unconsciously, and Quentin wondered what scars her sleeves concealed. When I lost our child, he became convinced I'd done it deliberately. The beatings grew worse. I knew eventually he would kill me. So you ran, Quentin concluded softly. She nodded. I took money from his safe. Not much, just enough for a train ticket west. I thought I could disappear, start over. A bitter smile crossed her lips. I didn't count on him hiring men to find me. Quentin's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. The men who hurt you before you reached Kennewick. Bounty hunters, Lily confirmed. I escaped when they stopped to water the horses. Ran for miles before I found the road to town. She looked at him directly. He won't stop looking, Quentin. George views me as his property, and now I've stolen from him too. You're not property, Quentin said firmly. And you're not alone anymore. Lily's confession changed something between them, a strengthening of trust that manifested in small ways, standing closer, lingering glances, hands brushing when passing objects. Neither acknowledged the growing attraction verbally, both wary of vulnerability for different reasons. The peaceful rhythm of their shared existence was shattered one crisp October morning when Quentin rode into town for supplies. Sheriff Morgan intercepted him outside the general store. Been meaning to ride out to see you, Bridges, the lawman said, his expression grave. Had some men through town asking questions about a woman. Description matches your house guest. Quentin's face revealed nothing. What kind of men? The kind that carry weapons and don't smile when they talk, Morgan replied. Said they represent a prominent businessman from St. Louis whose wife ran off with family valuables. And what did you tell them? Quentin asked, his tone deceptively casual as he loaded supplies into his wagon. That I hadn't seen anyone matching that description, the sheriff said. But Kennewick's a small town, Quentin. People talk. Mrs. Peterson mentioned the clothes she gave you for a poor relation staying at your place. Quentin cursed under his breath. These men mean business, Morgan continued. I can't protect someone if they're actually wanted for theft. She's not a thief, Quentin said firmly. She's a woman escaping a monster who happens to have friends in high places. The sheriff studied him. You sure about that? You've only known her, 3 months? I'm sure, Quentin said without hesitation. Morgan sighed. Those men left yesterday, heading north, but they'll be back when they realize they're on the wrong trail. I'd suggest your friend make herself scarce before then, he paused, or make her situation more permanent and protected. Quentin frowned. Meaning a woman alone has few rights, but a married woman is her husband's responsibility. Even the law respects that. The sheriff clapped him on the shoulder. Just something to consider. The ride home seemed interminable as Quentin wrestled with implications. The idea of marriage as protection wasn't foreign frontier pragmatism, often led to unions based on mutual benefit rather than love. But the feelings growing between him and Lily complicated matters. Proposing marriage as a legal shield might insult whatever was developing naturally between them. Lily knew something was wrong the moment he returned, her newfound security instantly replaced by vigilance. What happened? She asked, helping unload supplies with tense movements. Quentin related his conversation with the sheriff, watching her face pale with each word. They found me, she whispered, leaning against the wagon for support. They're looking, Quentin corrected. But they don't know you're here, they're heading north. For now, Lily said. I should leave. I've brought danger to your doorstep. No, Quentin interrupted firmly. Running isn't the answer. I can't stay and put you at risk, she insisted. There's another option, Quentin said, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider. Marry me. Lily stared at him, shock written across her features. What? As my wife, you'd have legal protection. Your husband's word against your former husband's. At minimum, it would force a proper investigation rather than simply returning you to him. Quentin removed his hat, suddenly feeling awkward. It's not just pragmatism speaking, Lily. These months with you. I haven't felt this alive since before Catherine died. Quentin, she began, her voice unsteady. Marriage is a serious commitment. You barely know me. I know enough, he insisted. I know you're kind and resilient. I know you laugh at my terrible jokes and read poetry by lamplight. I know this place has felt like a home again since you arrived. He stepped closer. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. We can continue as we have been, just with the legal protection of my name. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Your name, she repeated softly. You've already given me so much. Then give me the peace of knowing you're safe, he countered. She studied his face, searching for any sign of reluctance or sacrifice. Finding none, she took a deep breath. Yes, she said finally. I will marry you, Quentin Bridges. The wedding took place the following Sunday. A simple ceremony in Quentin's living room with only Reverend Collins, Sheriff Morgan, and the widow Johnson as witnesses. Lily wore a blue dress borrowed from Mrs. Johnson, with wildflowers in her hair. Quentin had splurged on a new shirt and had actually trimmed his beard for the occasion. Do you, Quentin Bridges, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Reverend Collins asked. I do, Quentin replied, his voice steady as he gazed at Lily. And do you? The minister paused, looking at Lily. I'm afraid I don't know your full name, my dear. Lily hesitated only briefly. Lily Ashford, she said firmly. The The Reverend nodded. "Do you, Lily Ashford, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," she answered, her eyes never leaving Quentin's. "Then by the power vested in me I pronounce you husband and wife." The Reverend smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Quentin leaned forward, intending a brief, chaste kiss, but Lily's hand rose to his cheek, deepening the moment into something that left them both breathless and the witnesses tactfully examining the ceiling. That night, after their guests departed, an unexpected shyness fell between them as they stood in the cabin that was now officially their shared home. "I meant what I said earlier," Quentin broke the silence. "I don't expect anything." "I can continue sleeping by the fire." Lily stepped forward, placing her fingers gently against his lips. "I married you of my own free will, Quentin, not just for protection." "Lily," he breathed, his hands rising to frame her face with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "I never thought I could trust a man again," she whispered. "You've shown me I was wrong." Their first night as husband and wife banished the ghosts of the past. Where Lily had known only pain and domination, Quentin offered gentleness and reverence. Where he had experienced only grief and loneliness since Catherine's death, Lily brought renewal and hope. In the quiet aftermath, lying in each other's arms, Quentin traced patterns on her shoulder. "I never asked," he said softly. "Are you disappointed to be Mrs. Bridges instead of returning to your former life? The comforts of St. Louis must seem a world away from this frontier existence." Lily propped herself up to look at him. "There was nothing comfortable about my life there," she said firmly. "I was a prisoner in a gilded cage. Here I'm free." She kissed him softly. "Here, I'm home." The threat hanging over them receded as autumn deepened toward winter. No strangers appeared seeking a runaway wife, and gradually Lily's fear of venturing beyond the homestead diminished. By November, she accompanied Quentin to town for the first time, nervous but determined to face the community that would now be her neighbors. Kennewick's residents proved welcoming if curious. Quentin's status as a respected, if solitary, rancher extended to his new bride. Lily found herself invited to quilting circles and church socials, gradually forming friendships with other frontier women who recognized the strength beneath her quiet demeanor. "They all think I'm much more interesting than I am," Lily laughed one evening as they returned from a town gathering. Mrs. Turner asked if I'd write to her daughter in Boston about the latest fashions, as if I were some sort of society maven. Quentin smiled, enjoying the sound of her laughter. "You could tell her about the latest in practical ranch wear. Denim and leather never go out of style." The heavy snows of December and January kept them largely homebound, a period of contented isolation they used to deepen their connection. Quentin taught Lily to play chess and shoot a rifle. She introduced him to the joys of reading aloud by the fire and baking bread from scratch. Their physical relationship blossomed from tentative exploration to passionate communion, each encounter healing old wounds and cementing their bond. Quentin marveled at how a marriage begun in pragmatism had transformed into the deepest love he'd ever known. "You believe in fate?" he asked one night as they lay entwined beneath thick quilts, the wind howling outside their snug cabin. Lily considered the question. "I never did before. It seemed like an excuse for accepting whatever life handed you." She traced the line of his jaw. "But now I wonder. Of all the towns in the West, I stumbled into Kennewick. Of all the people who might have found me, it was you." "Lucky coincidence," he suggested. "Perhaps," she agreed. "Or perhaps some paths are meant to cross, no matter how unlikely the intersection." February brought an unexpected thaw and with it, trouble. Quentin was repairing fences on the far edge of their property when he spotted riders approaching from the east. 3 men, moving with purpose rather than the casual gait of neighbors. He mounted his horse and rode to intercept them before they could reach the cabin where Lily was alone. "Afternoon," he called as they drew near, keeping his hand casually close to the pistol at his hip. "You're on Bridges' land. Something I can help you with." The leader of the trio, a hard-faced man with a prominent scar across his chin, reined in his horse. "Looking for a woman," he said without preamble. "Runaway from St. Louis. Dark hair, light eyes, small build. Might be using a false name." "Haven't seen anyone like that," Quentin replied evenly. "Not many strangers pass through these parts, especially in winter." The man's eyes narrowed. "Sheriff in town says different. Says a woman matching that description turned up last summer. Says she's living with a rancher named Bridges." His gaze pointedly took in the homestead visible in the distance. "That would be you, I reckon." Quentin's expression remained impassive, though inwardly he cursed whatever loose tongue had betrayed them. "Sheriff's mistaken. The only woman at my place is my wife, Lily Bridges." "Your wife," the man repeated skeptically. "Recently married, I hear." 5 months ago," Quentin confirmed. "Anything else you gentlemen need?" The second man, younger and better dressed than his companions, spoke up. "Mr. Thornton simply wants what's his. His wife stole valuable family heirlooms when she fled. He's offering a reward for her return and the recovery of his property. Like I said, can't help you." Quentin nudged his horse forward, a clear indication the conversation was over. "Town's back the way you came if you need supplies before moving on." The scarred man didn't budge. "We'll need to speak with your wife, confirm she's not who we're looking for." "My wife is indisposed," Quentin said coldly. "And you're trespassing. I suggest you leave before this becomes unfriendly." The third man, silent until now, moved his coat aside to reveal a pistol. "Already seems unfriendly to me." Tension crackled between them, a standoff balanced on the edge of violence. Then a shot rang out, the bullet kicking up dirt near the horse's hooves. The men wheeled around to see Lily standing 50 yards away, rifle aimed steadily in their direction. "That was a warning," she called, her voice carrying clearly across the distance. "The next one won't be." The scarred man's hand moved toward his weapon, but Quentin's was already drawn. "I wouldn't," he advised quietly. "This isn't over," the man growled, but he signaled his companions to retreat. "Yes," Lily said as they reluctantly turned their horses. "It is." The men rode away, casting baleful glances over their shoulders. When they were out of earshot, Quentin rode quickly to Lily's side. "That was dangerous," he admonished, though pride colored his concern. "So was confronting them alone," she countered, lowering the rifle. "I saw them from the window. Recognized Harker, the one with the scar. He works for George." Quentin dismounted. "We need to go to town, speak with Sheriff Morgan. Those men won't give up easily." "No," Lily agreed, her face set with determination. "But neither will we." Sheriff Morgan listened grimly to their account. "I swear I didn't tell them anything," he insisted. "Must have been Clyde at the saloon. He's got loose lips when the whiskey flows." "Doesn't matter now," Quentin said. "They know Lily's here. What matters is what they'll do next." "They'll try to take me back to St. Louis," Lily said with certainty. "George won't accept being defied, especially publicly. It's not about the money I took, it's about ownership." "Well, you're legally Mrs. Bridges now," Morgan pointed out. "Even if this Thornton fellow produces marriage papers, it creates a legal tangle that won't be easily resolved out here in the territories." "Unless they don't bother with legalities," Quentin said darkly. The sheriff nodded. "I'll keep an eye out for them in town. Meanwhile, I suggest you both stay alert. Don't travel alone. Keep weapons handy." They spent an uneasy night at the small hotel in Kennewick, unwilling to risk the isolated homestead until they had a better sense of their adversaries' intentions. Morning brought unexpected news when Reverend Collins sought them out at breakfast. "The younger gentleman among those men who were asking about you came to me privately," he informed them. "His name is Edward Thornton, your former husband's brother, Mrs. Bridges." Lily tensed. What did he want? "To speak with you without his companions present. He seemed troubled by the situation." Quentin shook his head. "It could be a trap." "I don't think so," the Reverend said thoughtfully. "He asked to meet at the church in daylight, said he has information you need to hear." Lily and Quentin exchanged glances. "I'll go with you," Quentin insisted. "He specified alone," Reverend Collins said, "but I will be present the entire time if that offers any reassurance." After much debate, Lily agreed to the meeting. Quentin positioned himself outside the church, ready to intervene at the first sign of trouble. Inside, Lily found Edward Thornton pacing nervously before the altar. "Mrs. Bridges," he greeted her formally. "Or should I say Mrs. Thornton? My name is Lily Bridges," she replied firmly. "State your business, Mr. Thornton." Edward ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of George that Lily took an involuntary step backward. Noticing her reaction, he stopped immediately. "I'm not here on behalf of my brother," he said. "At least, not officially. I came because I believe you're in grave danger." "From your brother's men," Lily stated. "Yes, Harker particularly is, unrestrained in his methods." Edward glanced at Reverend Collins, then continued more quietly. "George is obsessed with bringing you back. Not for love, forgive my frankness, but for pride. He's told everyone you suffered a nervous collapse and are being treated at a private sanitarium." Lily's mouth tightened. "Convenient explanation for my absence." "Indeed." Edward hesitated. "I've never interfered in my brother's affairs before." "But what he did to you?" He met her eyes directly. "I saw the bruises, Lily. Over the years, I said nothing, did nothing. That shame is mine to bear." "Why help me now?" she asked suspiciously. "Because George has changed since you left, grown darker, more volatile. I fear what he'll do if he gets you back." Edward withdrew an envelope from his coat. "Here are train tickets to California, for you and your husband. Also, a letter from our family lawyer confirming that in exchange for signing divorce papers, you'll receive a settlement sufficient to start a new life far from St. Louis." Lily stared at the envelope. "George agreed to this." Edward looked away. "No, this is my initiative. But I can persuade him it's the sensible solution, once it's presented as fait accompli. And his men? Harker, I'll handle them," Edward promised. "The train leaves tomorrow morning. My suggestion is that you and your husband board it and don't look back." Lily took the envelope slowly. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," Edward said simply, "but considering the alternatives." He bowed slightly. "Good day, Mrs. Bridges. I hope we never meet again." After Edward departed, Lily relayed the conversation to Quentin outside. "It could be a trap," he repeated, examining the tickets skeptically. "Or it could be salvation," she countered. "A chance to be truly free of George's shadow." They debated long into the night. California represented a fresh start, far from the threat of George Thornton. Yet Wyoming had become home, the place where Lily had found herself, and where Quentin had roots stretching back years. "I won't ask you to leave everything you've built," Lily said finally. "Your land, your life," Quentin took her hands. "You are my life," he said with simple conviction. "The land is just land. Home is wherever we build it together." Dawn found them at the small Kennewick station, a few possessions packed, the homestead left in the care of a neighboring rancher. Sheriff Morgan came to see them off, as did Reverend Collins and a handful of townspeople who'd come to consider Lily a friend. "Train's running on time for once," the station master called. 5 minutes. As they prepared to board, the thunder of approaching hoofbeats caused every head to turn. 3 riders appeared at the edge of town, galloping toward the station. "Harker," Lily whispered, clutching Quentin's arm. Sheriff Morgan stepped forward, hand on his pistol. "Stay behind me." But as the riders drew closer, they recognized Edward Thornton in the lead, his face urgent. He reined in sharply at the platform. "Thank God you haven't left," he gasped. "It's a trap. George arrived last night. He knows everything." He dismounted shakily. "Harker suspected I might warn you. They're watching the station in Cheyenne, the train's first stop. Why are you really helping us?" Quentin demanded. Edward's expression was pained. "Because I loved my brother once before ambition poisoned him. Because what he's become shames our family name." He straightened. "And because no one deserves what he did to Lily." "What can we do?" Lily asked. "If they're watching the trains, not all of them," Edward interrupted. "There's a freight train coming through at noon, headed south to Denver. The conductor owes me a favor." He handed Quentin a letter. "Show him this. He'll let you ride in the guard's compartment." The station master called final boarding for the passenger train. Edward nodded toward it. "I'll be on that train, along with these men who supposedly work for George. By the time we reach Cheyenne, you'll be well on your way to Denver." Quentin studied the younger Thornton, measuring his sincerity. "Why risk yourself?" A sad smile crossed Edward's face. "Perhaps to balance the scales for years of cowardice." He glanced at Lily. "Be happy, both of you. It's the best revenge." As the passenger train pulled away with Edward aboard, Lily and Quentin retreated to Sheriff Morgan's office to await the freight train. The hours passed tensely, but true to Edward's word, the noon train accepted them based on his letter. The journey to Denver proved uncomfortable but uneventful. From there, they caught another train west, putting miles and mountains between themselves and George Thornton's reach. By the time they crossed into Nevada territory, Lily began to believe they might truly be free. They settled in a small but growing town near Sacramento, where Quentin's experience with cattle earned him a position managing a large ranch. Lily, with her refined education, found work teaching at the local school. They purchased a modest house on the edge of town, with enough land for a garden and a few horses. Letters from Reverend Collins brought welcome news. Edward Thornton had indeed filed divorce papers on George's behalf, effectively ending any legal claim to Lily. Whether from recognition of defeat or due to his brother's influence, George Thornton made no further attempts to find her. One crisp autumn evening, a year after their arrival in California, Quentin returned home to find Lily waiting on their porch, a secretive smile playing on her lips. "What's that look for?" he asked, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. "I received a letter today," she said, holding up an envelope bearing the Wyoming territorial postmark. "From Kennewick?" Quentin asked, settling beside her. "Everything all right, more than all right," Lily assured him. "Sheriff Morgan writes that he's completed the legal transfer of your homestead. All the paperwork is finalized." Quentin looked surprised. "I thought Johnson was buying it." "He was," Lily agreed. "But I asked the sheriff to find another buyer." She took a deep breath. "You gave up your home for me, Quentin. I wanted to give it back to you when it's safe." "Lily," he began. "Edward sent another letter," she continued. "George has remarried, some banking heiress from Boston. Edward believes his obsession with finding me has finally died." "You want to go back," Quentin realized. Lily nodded. "Not immediately, but someday. That land was your dream. I saw how you looked at it, how you spoke of it." She took his hands. "Besides, I have another reason for wanting a home of our own away from town." Quentin's brow furrowed, then cleared as understanding dawned. "Lily, are you?" Her smile widened. "In about 7 months there will be 3 of us." Joy transformed Quentin's face as he gathered her into his arms, their laughter mingling in the golden California twilight. Spring brought the birth of their son, James Edward Bridges, a healthy boy with his father's strong features and his mother's amber eyes. By the time he was 6 months old, they had made the decision to return to Wyoming. The journey east was easier than their flight west had been. They traveled comfortably, taking time to enjoy the changing landscapes and to introduce young James to the vast country that was his birthright. Kennewick welcomed them back with genuine warmth. The town had grown modestly in their absence, boasting a new schoolhouse and a small hotel. Their homestead, maintained by a caretaker during their absence, awaited their return like a faithful friend. "It needs some work," Quentin observed as they approached the cabin that autumn afternoon. The structure stood solid, but the porch sagged slightly and the garden had gone wild. "It needs a woman's touch again," Lily agreed, cradling James against her shoulder. As they stepped inside, memories flooded back Lily's first days of recovery, quiet evenings by the fire, the simple ceremony that had made her Lily Bridges. The cabin felt smaller than she remembered, but somehow more significant. "Welcome home," Quentin said softly, watching her face. Lily turned to him, eyes shining. "I never thought I'd have a real home again," she admitted. "When I stumbled into Kennewick that day, I was running from something, not toward anything." "And now?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. She leaned into his embrace, their son nestled between them. "Now I know some people are meant to find each other against all odds." She smiled up at him. A nameless woman and a lonely cowboy, building something neither could have imagined alone. That night, after settling James in the cradle Quentin had crafted during their journey, they stood on the porch watching stars appear over the Wyoming plains. The vastness that had once seemed threatening to Lily now felt like a protective blanket, wrapping them in possibility. "No regrets?" Quentin asked, his arms secure around her shoulders. "Not one," she assured him. "This is where I found myself, where I became Lily Bridges." She turned in his arms. "Where I learned that love doesn't have to hurt." "I plan to spend the rest of our lives proving that," he promised, kissing her with the tenderness that still made her heart race. Inside the cabin, James made a small sound in his sleep, a reminder of their shared future. Tomorrow would bring the work of truly making the homestead theirs again, repairs and planting, reuniting with neighbors, establishing new routines. But tonight was for savoring the journey that had brought them full circle. As the years passed, the Bridges homestead flourished. The original cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family, with the addition of 2 daughters, Catherine, born 2 years after their return, and Emma, who arrived 3 years later. The modest cattle operation Quentin had started before meeting Lily grew into one of the territory's respected ranches, with a reputation for fair dealing and quality stock. Lily's transformation from frightened runaway to confident rancher's wife and mother continued to deepen. She established a small library in Kennewick, taught reading classes for the children of ranch hands, and became a quiet force in the community. The shadows of her past receded, though she never forgot the lessons they had taught her about resilience and self-worth. Occasionally, letters arrived from Edward Thornton, bringing news from St. Louis. George had indeed moved on, his banking empire expanding and his new marriage producing heirs to his fortune. Edward himself had married a widow with progressive ideas and had distanced himself from his brother's business interests, focusing instead on philanthropic endeavors. On the 10th anniversary of the day Lily had stumbled into Kennewick, she and Quentin hosted a celebration at their ranch. Friends and neighbors gathered to share food, music, and the sense of community that had sustained them through harsh winters and challenging times. As twilight fell, Quentin raised a glass to his wife. To Lily, he said, his voice carrying across the assembled guests, who came to us with nothing but courage and left us all richer for knowing her. Cheers and applause followed as Lily, blushing at the attention, stood to join him. Their children watched proudly, James, now a sturdy 10-year-old with his father's affinity for horses, Catherine at 8 already showing her mother's love of books, and 5-year-old Emma, a spirited child who charmed everyone she met. Later, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Quentin and Lily sat on their expanded porch, much as they had on so many evenings over the years. "Did you ever imagine this?" Lily asked, gesturing toward their thriving homestead and the peaceful land beyond. "That day when you found me half dead in the street," Quentin considered the question. "I hoped you'd survive," he said honestly. "I hoped you might find peace, but this," he shook his head, "this exceeds anything I could have imagined." "For me as well," Lily admitted. "I was simply running away. I never dreamed I was running toward something so much better." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the moon rise over the land that had witnessed their journey from strangers to soulmates. "No name, no past, nowhere to belong," Lily mused. "That's who I was when I came here." "And now," Quentin prompted gently. She smiled, the contentment of years well lived illuminating her face. "Now I'm Lily Bridges," she said with quiet certainty. "Wife, mother, teacher, friend, a woman who knows exactly where she belongs." Quentin squeezed her hand. "Right here," he agreed, "right where fate or chance or whatever you want to call it led you that day." "To you," Lily finished, "the cowboy who gave me his name and so much more." As night deepened over the Wyoming plains, stars scattered like promises across the vast sky. The Bridges homestead stood as testimony to the healing power of love and the possibility of beginning anew. What had started with a desperate woman stumbling into a frontier town had blossomed into a legacy of family, community, and belonging that would endure for generations to come. Years later, when their grandchildren gathered at their feet asking for stories, Lily would always begin the same way. "Once, there was a woman with no name who found herself in a dusty street, with nothing but fear and fading hope. And there was a cowboy who offered his hand instead of judgment, his name instead of questions, and eventually, his heart without reservation. And Quentin, gray now but still straight-backed and strong, would add with a wink to his grandchildren, 'That's how the best stories start, with someone lost finding exactly where they belong.'"